fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The world did not return to me with the grace of a sunrise, but with the heavy, muffled silence of a crypt. My head swam, a dizzying concoction of impending doom and the lingering scent of old parchment. I was lying on something soft, the beanbags of my secret refuge, but the texture against my cheek was not the cool linen of the library furniture. It was rougher, warmer. It smelled of steel oil, rain, and the distinct, musky scent of a man who spent his days swinging heavy objects at things that tried to kill him. I opened one eye, praying to the goddess that I was alone, that the dreadful receptionist had vanished back into the ether from whence she came. Instead, I found myself staring directly into a wall of burnished plate armor. Finally, a voice rumbled, low and deep, vibrating through the chest plate my cheek was currently pressed against. I was beginning to wonder if the shock had actually stopped your heart, princess. I scrambled back, my limbs tangling in the plush fabric of the beanbag, until my back hit the leg of a sturdy oak table. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear of assassination, but from the sudden, suffocating proximity of the one man I had been trying to avoid almost as fervently as the Adventurers' Guild. Sir Silas Vane, Lord Commander of the Royal Guard, the man whose gaze felt heavier than a dragon's scale. He stood over me, his helmet tucked under one arm, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. The hidden reading room was dim, lit only by the pale, dying light of the afternoon filtering through the unbreakable glass window. It cast his face in sharp relief, the strong jaw, the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, and eyes the color of a stormy sea that saw far too much. Sir Silas, I managed, smoothing down my dress with trembling hands. I summoned my most imperious yet fragile tone. How dare you enter a maiden's private sanctuary without announcement? I could have been unclothed or reading poetry. The door was open, Silas said, his voice devoid of amusement. He tossed a piece of parchment onto the low table between us. It was the certificate, the dreadful, accursed SS rank certificate, and the receptionist said you had taken ill after receiving good news. She left this. I stared at the paper as if it were a viper coiled to strike. It is a forgery, a prank, clearly. Is it? Silas took a step closer. The room, which had seemed so spacious and cozy only moments ago, suddenly felt incredibly small. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and imposing, eating up the air in the room, because the guild doesn't make mistakes with signatures like that, and I've seen the reports from the border, Juliette. He used my given name. He never used my given name. I swallowed hard, looking away. I have no idea what you mean. I am merely a princess who enjoys naps and shortcakes. The exertion of looking at words made me faint. Silas sighed, a sound of profound frustration. He dropped to one knee, bringing himself to my eye level. The shift in elevation did nothing to lessen his intensity. If anything, it made the heat radiating from his body more palpable. Drop the act, he growled softly. We are alone, the receptionist is gone, the staff are dismissed for the evening. He reached out, his gloved fingers hovering near my chin before thinking better of it and pulling back. I found you unconscious, and when I picked you up, your muscle density, your pulse, it wasn't the pulse of a sleeping girl. It was the rhythm of a predator waiting to strike. You are imagining things, Commander. Am I? His eyes dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes, darkening. Then why, when I carried you, did my mana instinctively flare as if I were holding a bomb? I opened my mouth to deny it, to unleash a torrent of asterisk oh-ho-ho-hos and feigned ignorance, when a sharp, mechanical asterisk clack echoed from the entrance. We both froze. The door to the hidden room, the false stationery closet, shuddered. Then, with a low, ominous hum, runes began to glow along the doorframe, not the gentle blue of illumination spells, but the angry, pulsing crimson of a containment ward. Silas was on his feet in a blur of motion, his sword drawn before I could even blink. He threw himself at the door, driving his shoulder into the wood. It didn't budge, it didn't even creak. A lockdown ward, Silas hissed, tracing a glowing symbol with the tip of his blade. The metal sparked, rejecting the contact. He turned back to me, his expression grim. High level, royal grade. Miriam, I whispered, horror dawning on me. She said she was installing new security measures for the rare books, anti-theft protocols. We aren't thieves, Silas noted dryly. No, I said, feeling the air in the room suddenly grow heavy and still. but we are unauthorized biological entities in a restricted zone after hours. Silas looked at the window, the unbreakable glass I had failed to scratch earlier. Then he looked at the door. Finally, he looked at me. The realization settled between us like a physical weight. "The air cycler has shut off," Silas said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "And these wards, they are designed to incapacitate intruders by overheating the environment." As if on command, the temperature in the room spiked. It wasn't a gradual warmth. It was an immediate, oppressive wave of heat that made the air thick and difficult to swallow. "Silas," I said, my voice faltering as I looked at the glowing red runes. He turned to me, his eyes blazing. "If you are truly just a lazy princess, Juliette, you are going to die in here within the hour. But if you are what that piece of paper says you are, you might be the only one getting us out." The heat was a living thing. It pressed against my skin like a hot, wet blanket, soaking into the layers of my dress, turning the silk damp and heavy. 10 minutes had passed. It felt like 10 years. Silas had abandoned his dignity 5 minutes ago. His heavy plate armor lay in a discarded heap in the corner, clanking loudly as he stripped it off piece by piece. He was now down to his chainmail and the padded gambeson beneath, and even that was soaked through. I sat on the edge of the sofa, fanning myself with a first edition of the Scandals of the incorrigible Viscount Asterisk, trying desperately to ignore the way the damp fabric of Silas's undershirt clung to the muscles of his back as he prowled the perimeter of our cage. "It's a kinetic barrier," he grunted, testing the window again. He struck it with his gauntleted fist. The glass didn't shatter. It absorbed the blow, rippling like water, and threw him backward. He landed hard, sliding across the carpet to my feet. He groaned, a sound of pain that cut through my carefully constructed apathy. "Silas," I leaned forward, instinctively reaching out. "Don't," he bit out, pushing himself up to a sitting position. He leaned his back against the sofa, right between my legs. His head fell back, resting near my knee. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. "Save your energy. The heat, it drains stamina first, then consciousness." He was right. The air was becoming thin, metallic. My head pounded, but unlike him, my body was conditioned for extremes. I had traversed the volcanic ridges of the dragon's spine just to find a specific type of tea leaf. I had meditated in the frozen waterfalls of the north to avoid a tea party with my aunt. This heat was uncomfortable, yes, but for an SS plus rank adventurer, it was merely a warm bath. For Silas, however, it was lethal. I looked down at him. The commander of the guard, the man who was supposed to be my jailer, my watcher, was fading. His skin was flushed a dangerous shade of red, and beads of sweat dripped from his jaw, landing on the carpet. "Take off the gambeson," I commanded softly. He cracked one eye open, looking up at me from his position on the floor. His gaze was hazy, drunk on heat and exhaustion. "Is that an order, Your Highness?" "It is a medical necessity, you stubborn mule. You are overheating." He let out a dry, broken laugh. "If I take this off, I have no protection. If the wards escalate to lightning or blades. If you pass out, you cannot protect me anyway." His jaw tightened. Slowly, with trembling hands, he began to undo the laces of his padded jacket. It was a slow, agonizing striptease born of survival. When he finally shrugged the heavy material off, throwing it aside, I had to bite the inside of my cheek. Beneath the padding, he wore a thin, sleeveless linen undershirt that was practically translucent with sweat. His arms were corded with muscle, mapped with old scars, tokens of a life spent shielding my family, shielding me asterisk. He slumped back against the sofa, his bare arm brushing against my ankle. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through me that had nothing to do with the magical wards. "Why won't you just break it?" he murmured, his eyes slipping shut, his voice was slurring. "I know you can. I watched you 2 years ago in the courtyard. You thought no one was looking. You cut a falling raindrop in half, not with a sword, with a asterisk twig asterisk." I froze. He had known. All this time he had known. "Silas," I whispered. "I didn't tell anyone," he rasped, his head lolling to the side to rest against my calf. His skin was burning hot. "I wanted to know why you hide. You could be a legend, a queen of war." "I don't want to be a queen of war," I said, my voice trembling. "I want to read, I want to eat cake, I want peace." "And yet," he whispered, shifting so his cheek pressed intimately against my leg, seeking the coolness of my silk stockings, "chaos follows you, and I follow the chaos, just to be near you. My breath hitched, the heat in the room seemed to spike, but this time, the fire originated in my chest. Silas, you are delirious. Maybe. He turned his face inward, pressing a kiss to the side of my knee through the fabric. It was a worshipful, desperate gesture. But I'm not blind. The wards, they aren't just heat, Juliette. They're monosiphons. They feed on agitation, desire, fear. He looked up at me then, his gray eyes blown wide, dark with a hunger that terrified me. And right now, he groaned, reaching up to grip my hand, his calloused palm rough against my skin, I am terrified I'm going to die without tasting the truth of you. The room hummed louder, the red light pulsed faster, matching the erratic rhythm of his heart and mine. The air was so thick with magic and pheromones it tasted like copper and honey. Silas gripped my hand as if it were the only anchor in a storm. He pulled himself up, using the sofa and my body for leverage, until he was hovering over me. The heat had stripped away the formalities of rank. He wasn't a knight and I wasn't a princess. We were two animals trapped in a cage that was slowly cooking us alive. Juliette, he breathed, his name for me sounding like a prayer. He straddled my lap, his heavy thighs bracketing mine, careful not to put his full weight on me, but close enough that I could feel the radiant furnace of his body. His hair dripped sweat onto my collarbone. Silas, you need to lie down, I tried to say, but my voice was a traitorous whisper. I brought my hands up to push him away, but instead, my fingers curled into the damp hair at the nape of his neck. Stop lying, he growled, leaning down until our noses brushed. Stop pretending you are weak, it insults us both. His lips brushed my jawline, searingly hot. I gasped, arching my back involuntarily. The sensation was overwhelming. The magical dampening field was stripping away my carefully honed control, my discipline. If I show you, I whispered, my eyes fluttering shut as he kissed the sensitive spot below my ear, nothing will be the same. Good, he murmured against my skin. I hate the way things are. I hate watching you from a distance, pretending I don't see the lioness in the house cat's skin. His hand moved to my waist, his thumb tracing the curve of my hip bone through the dress. It was possessive, demanding. I snapped. I stopped suppressing my mana. I let the ocean of power I usually kept locked away behind a dam of laziness and indifference trickle out, just a drop. A shockwave of silent energy blasted outward from my skin. The red runes on the door flared white. The oppressive heat in the room didn't vanish, but it swirled, pushed back by the sheer density of my aura. Silas froze, his body tense against mine. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. He didn't look afraid. He looked vindicated asterisk. There she is, he whispered, a savage grin tugging at his mouth. He didn't pull away from the power, he leaned into it. He kissed me then, crashing his mouth against mine with a desperation that shattered the last of my resolve. It wasn't a gentle, courtly kiss. It was a collision. It tasted of salt and iron and unyielding want. I kissed him back, my hand sliding down his bare back, feeling the muscles bunch and shift. I poured a fraction of my mana into him, a soothing, cool stream of restorative energy meant to counteract the heat exhaustion. He groaned into my mouth, shuddering as the healing magic flooded his veins. You are intoxicating. And you are heavy, I murmured against his lips, though I made no move to push him off. Tell me to stop, he challenged, biting lightly at my lower lip. Use that strength, throw me across the room, tell me you don't want this. My voice failed me because I did want it. I wanted this fierce, broken honesty more than I wanted my nap. His hand moved lower, hiking up the hem of my dress, his rough palm finding the bare skin of my thigh. The friction was electric. Say it, Juliette, tell me I'm not the only one burning. You aren't, I confessed, opening my eyes to stare into his storm-gray depths. You never were. He looked as though he might devour me whole. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine, our breaths mingling in the superheated air. The tension was a pulled bowstring ready to snap. And then the glass shattered. Not the window to the courtyard, the skylight. Whatever durability spell Miriam had cast on the windows, she had neglected the ceiling. With a deafening crash, shards of reinforced glass rained down around us. Silas was moving before the first shard hit the floor. He threw his body over mine, shielding me from the glass, shielding me from the threat. Two figures dropped from the ceiling, landing in a crouch amidst the debris. They were dressed in black stealth gear, faces obscured by masks, holding daggers that dripped with a familiar, viscous green liquid, wyvern venom. "What's that?" "Target located," one of them rasped. "The Knight Commander is incapacitated. The princess is unsecured." Silas snarled, rolling off me and snatching up his sword from where it had fallen. He stood between me and them, swaying slightly, his body still recovering from the heat sickness despite my healing. He was half naked, unarmored, and facing two armed professionals. "Touch her," Silas growled, his voice pure steel, "and I will flay the skin from your bones." "Down, boy," the second assassin laughed, stepping forward. "We aren't here for her, we're here for the ransom, but if you insist on dying first." Silas raised his sword, his form perfect despite his exhaustion, but I saw the tremor in his arm. I sighed. I stood up from the sofa, smoothing down the wrinkles in my dress. I reached up and adjusted my hair, which had become terribly disheveled during our activities. "Silas," I said calmly. "Stay back, Juliette," he barked, not looking at me. "No," I said. I walked forward until I was standing back to back with him. I could feel the heat radiating off his bare skin. I believe I promised to maintain my lifestyle by any means necessary, and getting kidnapped is terribly inconvenient for my schedule. I held out my hand. A letter opener from the desk flew across the room and slapped into my palm. It was a dull, ornamental thing made of brass. "Besides," I murmured, glancing over my shoulder at him, "you interrupted my kiss." The assassins paused, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. They looked at the shirtless, battered knight, and then at the princess holding a dull letter opener as if it were Excalibur. "Is she serious?" the first assassin asked. "Kill the knight, grab the girl," the second ordered. They lunged. Time did not slow down. That was a cliché for amateurs. Time remained constant. I simply stepped outside of its constraints. Silas moved to intercept the one on the left. He parried a venom-coated dagger with a jarring clang of steel, his muscles straining. He was good, exceptionally good, but he was tired. The assassin on the right came for me. He was fast, enhanced by speed magic. To a normal eye, he was a blur. To me, he was moving through molasses. "Truly," I sighed, sidestepping his thrust with a minimal tilt of my hips. The dagger passed inches from my ribs. "Your footwork is atrocious." I brought the brass letter opener down. I didn't stab him. That would be messy. I simply tapped the pressure point at the junction of his neck and shoulder with the precision of a master surgeon. Thwag. The assassin's eyes rolled back into his head. His legs folded instantly, and he collapsed face first onto the carpet with a heavy thud. I turned just as Silas roared, locking blades with his opponent. The assassin kicked Silas in his injured knee, bringing the big man down. The assassin raised his dagger for the killing blow. "Oh, for heaven's sake," I muttered. I flicked my wrist. The letter opener left my hand, spinning through the air with a terrifying hum. It struck the flat of the assassin's dagger just as it descended, shattering the blade into shrapnel. The assassin gaped at his broken hilt. He looked at me. He looked at the letter opener embedded deep in the oak bookshelf across the room. Who are you?" he stammered. I walked toward him. I didn't run, I didn't rush. I simply walked, letting the full weight of my SS plus rank killing intent wash over him. The air around me grew cold, pressing down with the weight of the ocean depths. The red warning lights of the room seemed to dim in deference to the darkness radiating from me. "I am Juliette Consen," I said pleasantly, though my voice echoed with a hollow, terrifying resonance, "and you have ruined my evening." The assassin dropped his broken weapon. He fell to his knees, his will completely shattered by the sheer metaphysical pressure I was exerting. He began to weep silently. "Sleep," I commanded. He slumped over, unconscious, before he hit the ground. Silence returned to the room. The only sound was the jagged breathing of the Knight Commander. I turned to Silas. He was still on one knee, using his sword to hold himself up. He wasn't looking at the unconscious assassins. He was looking at me. His expression was unreadable. "So," he said hoarsely, "SS plus rank." I winced, dropping the terrifying aura instantly and reverting to a slump. "Please don't say it out loud. It sounds so exhausting." Silas slowly stood up. He limped over to the nearest assassin, checking for pulses, securing them with the curtain cords he ripped from the wall. Only when the threat was neutralized did he turn back to me. He walked over, stopping inches away. He was covered in sweat, grime, and a smear of blood on his cheek. He looked magnificent. "You took out a high-level shade with a letter opener," he said. It was a very balanced letter opener. "Juliette." He reached out, cupping my face in his large, rough hands. The heat of the room was fading as the wards finally deactivated, sensing the threat, or perhaps terrified of me, was gone, but the heat between us remained. "You are," he shook his head, a crooked, incredulous smile touching his lips. "You are the most terrifying, beautiful thing I have ever seen." "Does this mean you're going to report me?" I asked, leaning into his touch despite myself. "The paperwork will be dreadful." "Report you," Silas let out a low laugh. He lowered his forehead to mine again. "No, I'm going to keep your secret on one condition." "And that is?" "No more running," he whispered, his thumb brushing my lower lip. "You can pretend to be lazy. You can pretend to be weak for the rest of the world, but when it's just us, you don't hide, not from me." I looked up at him, seeing the adoration and the challenge in his eyes. It promised work, it promised effort, it promised a distinct lack of napping. But as he leaned down and kissed me again, softly this time, a seal on a pact forged in sweat and secrets, I decided that perhaps, just this once, a little effort might be worth it. "Very well," I murmured against his mouth, "but I expect snacks," in silence about the letter opener. Silas smiled, pulling me flush against his chest. "Done." Outside, the first shouts of the palace guards could be heard approaching the broken skylight. But in the center of the ruin, wrapped in the arms of my doom, I finally felt safe.